Do you want to live more sustainably but aren't sure where to start or how it fits in with your everyday living? The ReNewy Living Podcast simplifies sustainability so you can feel confident to take small, meaningful actions that fit into your lifestyle. Based on the lands of the Awabakal and Warramai people in Newcastle, Australia, you'll learn how to live lighter on our planet through practical ideas, stories from like-minded people, and examples of businesses doing great things. With an open heart and mind, join me, Marty Lee, as we explore how to consume less, build stronger community connections, and thrive in your neighbourhood, wherever you call home. Welcome to the ReNewy Living Podcast. Hello, I'm Marty Lee and welcome to the ReNewy Living Podcast. While we rush through our days, bees remind us that life works best when it follows nature's pace. These mighty insects show us what it means to live in harmony and to work in tune with the seasons. Their survival depends on connection to each other, to plants and to place. In this episode, I'd love you to meet Anna Scobie and Kelly Lees from Newcastle-based business Urban Hum. We're exploring the role of bees in our local environment and how understanding them connects us with the bigger picture of environmental sustainability. From permaculture principles to planting a tiny forest and even facing the challenges of varroa mite, we'll talk about what it means to respond with care and curiosity. This episode is a reminder that living sustainably isn't just about action, it's about rhythm. It's about learning from nature, working with the seasons, and staying open to what some of the smallest creatures can teach us about a more connected and resilient future. G'day and welcome Kelly and welcome Anna.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here.
I love how we're sitting right here, right now in your tiny forest.
Yeah, it's one of our favourite places on our block to be able to come down and sit in the shade of trees that are only a couple of years old but already over 9 metres tall.
That's a massive height. It just feels so beautiful to be surrounded by so many trees. And you'll probably notice that there's lots of animals around us as well.
Indeed. So we have designed the block using permaculture principles. So you might hear some goats, some chickens, a rooster, a couple of dogs, and maybe even a child on school holidays in the background as well.
And even some guinea fowl and birds.
Indeed.
The guinea fowl can be really noisy, so we'll see what that brings us.
Yes, the guinea fowl do like to raise an alarm if predators come by, so they might let us know.
Yeah, let's start with your tiny forest story. This seems to be not the end point, but the point we're at right now of the tiny forest. What was your journey to get to this point?
It actually was a really beautiful journey. It came about at a time that was really difficult for us after varroa mite had hit and our 130 hives had been eradicated. And the tiny forest now sits where some of those hives had been euthanized. And it was like a difficult time for our family business. And we went to a community planting day at Terralba, the very first tiny forest in the Lake Macquarie area. And Kelly and I had a wonderful time, but so did our daughter. At the time, she was 5 and she really enjoyed planting trees. And the next day was a school day. And she said to me, I don't want to go to school. I want to plant trees. And it just put this spark in our head that we could make that happen. And Anna Noon from the Groundswell Collective put a call out of people and locations that would like a tiny forest. And after all of her red tape of getting one on public land, we thought it was a lovely opportunity to do it on private land and to open up our block to the community as well.
The block is not your average size block.
No, it's an acre tucked in Cardiff Heights. We're really lucky to be here. And as Anna said, we've developed it along permaculture principles with the tiny forest as part of that, promoting biodiversity on our block, because when we moved here, we noticed that there were already a lot of native birds and a lot of native animals, and so we wanted to create some habitat for those to support the local environment.
So the tiny forest is now where your hives were. What happened with varroa mite, and what was your journey with beekeeping prior to varroa mite? Perhaps, Kelly, can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, so we started off the business in 2009, something like that. I can't exactly remember. It was quite a long time ago. And we started off with just a couple of backyard hives and quickly realised a passion for beekeeping, and it became my full-time job. And we both got heavily involved in the business. And we had hives all over Newcastle, and we really, really loved it. And as part of that, we also ran education programs. So we taught beginning beekeeping workshops, and people used to come along and learn about bees and get hives themselves, which we're both ex-school teachers, so we're very passionate about education. And from there, that led me to be working with the DPI and training and teaching there.
So the DPI is the Department of
Primary Industries, which is now the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. It's had a name change. So I'm still working there, still teaching beekeeping. And in 2022, varroa actually it was detected in the sentinel hives at the Port of Newcastle. And so that led to an effort by government and lots of amateur and commercial beekeepers to attempt to eradicate varroa mite. It had never been tried before anywhere else in the world, and we really thought we had a chance at getting rid of the mite because we didn't really want to live with it. Unfortunately, that wasn't successful, and so we did lose our hives along with a lot of other people during that attempt to get rid of varroa. And it was a very difficult time for a lot of people, and for some people it's still really difficult. And I know not just us, but other people lost their businesses as well, and it had a huge impact on the industry. But now we're learning to live with the mite and, moving forward. So we'll see what happens from here.
Anna, would you like to add to that?
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the varroa mite response as well, and how difficult that was for the volunteers responders, that they worked into the night through really emotionally difficult times, and that has left a weight on the beekeeping industry and also recreational beekeepers that got involved, and that there really is a grief that I think people are still working through.
I know of one hobbyist beekeeper who loved having his beehives in the backyard, and then once the hives were destroyed because of varroa mite, then that's it. He's never returned because it's too complex.
It is much more complex to manage varroa mite and takes more time, but we hope that some people will be able to take that charge on board. But one thing that happened in this area, in the first red zone, was that I think people became fascinated with our native bees. The honeybees are, they're noisy and they give you this beautiful food product, and we see them so often that once we had this absence of them, people had this curiosity when they saw a blue bee fly past, or, other quirky little native bees. So I think that is one of the things that has come out of this that has been really beautiful, that connection with nature.
Yeah, that is really interesting, because when the varroa mite happened, there was a lot of discussion that I'd seen on some of the Facebook groups that I'm in about what kind of bees can they see and what happens in the environment. Once there were no honeybees around, what else did you notice in the environment?
Definitely noticed a lack of pollination in vegetable gardens, because the honeybees did bear a heavy weight of that pollination. But as Anna mentioned, I think people did notice the native bees. It's not that they weren't there before. I think that just honeybees were so ubiquitous and there were so many of them that the native bees sort of went unnoticed. They're quieter and smaller as a general rule. And so I think it was lovely that people noticed them, but definitely noticed a drop in vegetable pollination and those kinds of things. And it was very strange to go from having a garden full of bees to seeing almost no bees, and definitely no honeybees right after the eradication and the baiting program. So that was really, the garden was quiet. And that was, I know that a lot of people commented on that. It's like, my garden is just so quiet, the bees were just always there. And I think it was a background noise to a lot of people's gardening, right, was the buzz of honeybees. And so I think when that was gone, people really noticed it. For sure. And I know that we did. And I remember the first time we saw a honeybee afterwards, it was like, oh my goodness, there's a honeybee. Where did that come from? Because we didn't have hives yet at that time, and obviously there was a colony somewhere. So, yeah, it definitely was a change in the environment for sure.
How long did it take for that change to happen when you saw your first honeybee return?
Yeah, look, I don't actually remember. So we transitioned to management in September 23. So people were allowed to start beekeeping again, which meant that former red zones then became management zones. So I guess it was sometime after that, I think maybe October. There was obviously some hives around, and I think there probably were still a couple of feral colonies around the place that had survived. So, yeah, I think it was in that late spring, early summer of 2023. Yeah.
You were talking in the introduction about, this noticing the seasonal changes though. And I think native bees do provide that opportunity much more when you're sitting and observing. A winter day is much quieter for native bees than when you're in spring and you are seeing much more action around the place. So I think it has connected us a little bit more with that in the garden as well.
So that's something that you had already noticed, but the absence of bees meant that it was highlighted more to you?
Absolutely. And I think in general, you focus where you're at, and we were very focused on local food production, and honey was key to that, and pollination of friends' urban farms, and that was where we were very focused, and we were very interested in native bees, but the honeybees were taking up a lot of our life. So I think, when that moves away, it allows room for other things. And I think as a holistic approach, honeybees can be reintroduced in a more mindful way. They are an ecological problem as well when they're not managed, and they escape into bushland and take up cockatoo hollows and all sorts of things as well. So I think it does give us this opportunity to think how they fit within our food web, but also into a biological food web as well.
Honeybees aren't native to Australia, but they're an essential component to it. I went hiking on the overland track in Tasmania in February, and halfway, midway through the track where you can't go in for a day trek, I kept on seeing these trees in flower. They were gorgeous trees. They had little white flowers, with little pink inners, and they were just divine. And I would notice this smell as I'd walk past, and it was sort of like, I wanted to know, what are these trees? So I found out during that walk, by talking to other walkers, that it was a leatherwood tree in Tasmania. And I got so excited that I ran down to that tree to say hello to the tree and give it a sniff. But then my excitement was quickly quelled by nearly treading on a black tiger snake. It's like, oh, hello. Yes, you're a part of this environment as well. Great. And so there was this big squeal throughout the whole valley that people at the campsite knew it was me. But I was so excited to see that leatherwood tree, and to see that the honey that I can eat, this leatherwood honey, came from trees in Tasmania.
Kelly has just been on a big overseas trip, and one of the main things that was in her carry-on on the way back was honey from all of her different countries. And her glee, even after 2 decades of beekeeping, of the different flavours from the different locations, and being able to talk about that, I think is so beautiful, that it does link you to the pollens of the different areas, the nectars of the different areas. I think it's amazing.
Wow, Kelly, tell us about all the different flavours from honeys from where you visited, and that was for the Churchill Fellowship or Scholarship that you went on.
Yeah, that's right. I went on the Saskia Beer Churchill Fellowship, and I travelled to Papua New Guinea, Thailand and South Korea. And definitely I was studying ectoparasitic mites of honeybees, so varroa and tropicalaps mites, but definitely one of the highlights was trying all the honey in the different places, and yes, posting my clothes back in a box so that I could bring back lots of honey in my bag on the plane. So I checked how much I could bring in, and then I was probably pretty close to the limit. So and Anna's right, they're so different to Australian honeys, and I think that's what I found really interesting, was that it does very much mark a place. So in Australia, most of our honey is produced from eucalypt species. 75% of the honey is from eucalypt species. So it's got a very distinctive flavour. And although it varies from species to species, there's key elements that are very similar. And so it was great to taste the different honey. Like the honey from Papua New Guinea, it all just tastes like tropical fruit.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, like the main one that I've got up there, it sort of tastes like a combo of pineapple and mango. Not that that's what it's from, but that's just the flavours. So it's got this really intense, summery, tropical flavour, which is really amazing. And then the honey from Thailand, I don't even know if I can describe it. It's so interesting. Their key honeys are longan and lychee. And they probably wouldn't be something that most Australian palates would like because they're quite bitter. They've got this real bitter note and quite different to Australian honeys, which are quite sweet. They're still delicious. I thought they were delicious, but very different to Australian honeys. And then they have a few just little productions like sunflower honey and rubber honey and those sorts of things, which are quite different. And coffee honey.
Coffee honey?
Coffee honey, yeah, which I bought back for Anna. So they only produce a very small amount. The flowers don't produce much honey, and it's quite expensive. And it's very interesting flavour, very strong.
And what about the describing of the taste for a coffee honey? Does it taste like sweet honey or coffee?
It's got a bit of a coffee flavour. Anna, why don't you talk about it because you've eaten it mainly.
So the honey is really intense. Like you can't have too much of it. It is sort of like having coffee, very bitter, but still with that sweet afternote. It's very difficult to describe because it's not like anything I've had before.
So it also just goes to show how bees are very connected to the places that they live.
Yes, they are, very much so. Yeah, they forage in a 3 to 5 kilometre radius, but they'll stay closer if there's food closer, and they are. So they are looking for the optimal sources of nectar. So they will go to anything that produces nectar that they enjoy. And so coffee, they go a little bit crazy actually for the coffee plants. They really like it. I don't know whether it has any caffeine in it, but definitely it gives the bees a bit of a buzz and they do enjoy it. So yeah, bees are very connected to their location and they seek out nectar.
And it is interesting because European honeybees have only been here for 200 years. So it's interesting that they are out of place, but so is most of our diet that we eat. So without the honeybees helping, it would be very hard to sustain the level of food production in Australia. But we do love having a stingless hive in our backyard near our veggie patch, and they only really service our backyard. They'll go
500 metres is their flight range.
So when you say the stingless ones, are they the native one?
Yeah, so the ones we have are Tetragonula carbonaria, so they are the native stingless bees. So they live in a colony like honeybees. Their brood nest looks a little bit different, so their arrangement of how they make their babies and store their honey is a little bit different to honeybees. But, yeah, they live in a colony, so they're a eusocial insect like honeybees. Yeah, so there's a queen and drones and workers, but they only fly maximum of 500 metres. So there has to be flora in close proximity if you have stingless bees, which is why they do so well in urban areas because there's tons of food around.
Yeah, within a 500-metre radius. I chatted to Caves Beach Uniting Preschool in one of the other episodes, and they have a stingless hive in their playground for the kids, and they just love it. The kids love it, they respect it, and there's lots of flowers around that hive.
Yeah, look, they're really great because they are stingless, so they don't have a sting, unlike a lot of other native bees which can sting, rarely sting, but they can. The stingless bees live up to their name. They don't have a sting, and they are really interesting to watch. They come and go, they bring pollen in, they collect their waste pellets and they drop them out the front. So sometimes you get a little pile of poo out the front where they've dropped it right out the front. So they're really interesting to watch, and you can get really close to them and they just come and go and do their thing. And so that's why they're great for kids, because kids they can basically stick their nose in the entrance and have a look and it's fine.
And they make the most beautiful patterned wax. So they create a spiral within their hive for their brood and their babies. And they also have princesses. So whenever we're doing education programs, kids love the story that there's a queen bee, like with a European hive, but then there's also these princesses hiding and waiting to see if they need to take over the role as queen. But the reason they're hiding is because they'll be ripped apart if they're found. So they've got a very stressful life.
Yeah, they've got about a 3-week lifespan if they don't get caught. So they usually they hide, and then, the colony disposes of them if they don't need them. But they're always there in case they need them.
Is that different to the honeybees?
Yes, yeah. So most honeybee colonies will have a single queen at any given time. About 10% of colonies actually have 2 queens, but most beekeepers don't notice because one of the key things you learn when you're first starting to beekeep is how to find your queen. And the first thing you do once you find her is you stop looking because you're not looking for another one. But sometimes there is a second one. So up to 10%, they've done some studies, can have 2. But as a general rule, yes, you've got a single laying queen heading the colony, and she will be the mother of most of the bees in that hive.
And the teamwork that goes on for bees is extremely important. There's the majority are worker bees.
Correct, yeah.
Tell us about the job of the worker bees and what they do to make that liquefied nectar into honey.
Yeah, right. So they've got a lot of jobs, and making the honey is actually one of their last jobs that they do. So when they first hatch, they become nurse bees. So they clean out around the hive for the queen to lay new eggs. They look after the queen. They feed the babies. They might do guard duty. And then the very last job that they do is they go out to the outside world and they forage for nectar and pollen and water and propolis, which is sticky tree sap that they use inside the hive. So to make the honey, the bees go out and they gather nectar, and then they come back into the colony and they do a special dance called the tremble dance. And they do that, it's just where they shake their body, and they do that to a house bee. And the house bee will take the nectar from the other bee. So they touch tongues, and it's a process called trophallaxis where they swap the nectar. And when they do that, in swapping the nectar, they're taking a bit of water off, but they're also adding gut enzymes as well that start the transformation of those sugars. And then that house bee will swap the nectar a couple more times with other house bees, and then the final bee will regurgitate that nectar into a cell where they're storing the nectar. And then they go through this process of ripening the honey. And what they do is generally they do it at night. Some bees will line up at the front, and they push air through the hive, and the air going through the hive passes over the open cells and it evaporates some of the moisture off, because honey is always less than 21% water in Australia. It varies around the world. Stingless bee honey has more water, but European honeybee honey is always less than that. And so, it's a really nice thing to do if you do have bees, is warm summer nights is generally when they're doing the ripening. And so if you go down near your hive, you'll smell that scent wafting out of the hive, which smells absolutely amazing because you're getting all the smells from the nectar as they ripen that honey. And then they're constantly testing it for water content, and then once it's thick enough, they will cap it with wax, and then it's honey forever. And because of the low water content, it doesn't ferment, so it stays honey for thousands of years.
That is absolutely fascinating that you've explained that process really simply. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If humans weren't wanting the honey, what is the job or the role of honey within a hive?
It's their carbohydrate. So it's their food source. It's their energy source. So they eat 2 things. They eat pollen, and they get fed jelly from the house bees, the nurse bees, and then they also eat the honey. So it's their energy source for the hive. And so in a natural colony, if there was no human intervention, what would happen is eventually the colony would run out of storage space, and then that would in spring induce the colony to swarm and make a new colony. So half the bees would leave with the old queen and they would start a new hive, and the old hive would carry on. And sometimes those hives can last for decades. You know, they just requeen themselves every spring and they swarm, and it just stays there for a really long time. So there's lots of records. I've got friends who know of feral colonies that have been there for, 30, 40 years in the same place.
Yeah, wow. Because I always thought that swarming, like in modern urban backyard beekeeping, is usually when the queen disappears. Is it when the queen disappears or the queen is no longer wanted? Basically,
it's usually because they're out of space. That's a key trigger for it. The weather getting warmer as well is a trigger. So if bees are very in touch with the environment. We talked about the fact that they are very connected to their place. And part of that is they know when there's going to be a good nectar flow. So they know when the season's going to be good, when the weather's good, and they will take advantage of that by raising a new queen and putting the old queen on a diet and then harassing her until she leaves the hive with half the workers to make a new colony. So in urban environments, it's not great, and we want beekeepers to manage their bees so that they don't swarm, because they end up in chimneys and walls and all sorts of places you don't want them.
In all environments, because,
Yes.
with the migratory beekeepers that move bees for pollination, if they were to not manage it, and it would be feral colonies in bushland. So neither is a good scenario. But I think they are European honeybees, and they are making honey for the winter that's never coming. So that's why we can take so much honey in Australia. But I think that's given us a very complex problem when it comes to varroa mite, and that was part of what Kelly was researching. There was a willingness from a lot of beekeepers to say goodbye to their honeybees, to try with the eradication, to get rid of it, to remove the host, to give the mite time to leave the environment so that we could have this organic, beautiful honey that Australia is known for. Now it's much more complicated to manage varroa mite because there isn't a winter, and that honeybees acknowledge anyway. And it's just, it makes our honey production less organic.
It's possible to do it, to produce honey that has not been exposed to chemicals, but varroa management is complex, and it is challenging, and particularly in a commercial sense, it is very, very difficult, and beekeepers have to be mindful and careful of how they use controls. Obviously, there are other types of controls, mechanical controls, so things that they can do that don't involve chemicals. We're just in a challenging phase right now in that we've got lots of reinfestation from the environment. So the feral colonies have varroa, so you treat for varroa and then very quickly you get reinfested again. So, but that will settle down as it has in lots of other areas of the world, and there are places where they are managing bees now without chemicals. As Anna said, our challenge is that winter is pretty mild in Australia, so generally our colonies always have babies, and that's where varroa reproduces, in the brood, and so that's a challenge, a particular challenge for Australia given our climate.
Yeah, and so we're in Newcastle, it's very temperate here, and our winter is laughable in European terms, isn't it? Like 15 degrees is a cool day.
Yeah, that's right. Our bees are still flying. So I came out the other day and our colony was flying and it was 9 degrees, right? So we don't really have a proper winter. So if they're foraging, that means the queen is also laying. There's brood in there and the bees are very busy. So yes, our winter is laughable. And as Anna said, the bees don't really acknowledge that it's winter. The queen just carries on laying like it's spring. So it means that varroa also can reproduce all year round, which makes it a bit more challenging for us.
So the opposite of winter is summer. So here it can get really hot in the summer. How does that impact upon bees?
Yeah, so bees, one of the things that they collect from the environment is water. So they have to keep their brood nests, so where the babies are, at 34, 35 degrees. So regardless of outside ambient temperature, they are maintaining the brood nest temperature at that 35 degrees. And so once it gets above about 32 to 35, the bees primarily switch from foraging for nectar and pollen to foraging for water, which they use to keep the colony cool. They also engage in all sorts of fanning behaviour and bearding where they get on the outside of the hive, and because their bodies make heat, right? So they want to come out of the colony in order to make less heat inside to keep it the right temperature.
It's hard work being a bee.
It is, but it's also that community you were talking about, that none of them are about their individual comfort. It's about the baby bees being at the right temperature. And what I loved when we first started learning about beekeeping was I always had this idea that the queen was in charge, and it's far from the case. The worker bees dictate what the queen does and when it's time to go and create a new colony, and that they all work together and communicate in these really fun, dancing ways.
Yeah, they're a super organism. Everything is cooperative. All their behaviours are about genetic and colony survival, not about individuals. We could learn a lot from bees.
Yeah, exactly. We can learn a lot because this is the whole thing about living sustainably as well. Like, yes, we can do our individual actions, but when we work at them as a collective, it makes far more sense and we're a lot stronger at it. So that's just one thing that we can learn from bees.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are stronger together and bees do that really, really well. And I think that's what's great about the tiny forests actually, is that it really brings people together. Like when we had the planting day here, it was amazing. We had, 70 plus people here, kids, older people. It was just fantastic. Everyone just getting in and doing something together. It was just amazing.
And the trees do it too. So there's 750 trees here, and they have all grown so quickly because trees also like friends. So their root system is interconnected under the ground, and the fungus that has come up in the garden is amazing too. So it's this complete ecosystem in such a short period of time. And it is that community of people and the community of trees because it's planted in a ratio that would have been found in nature, the shrub layer and the tree canopy layer as well, and all endemic to this area. And that makes us really excited for the native bees because, they've been evolving together for 150 million years. We've been an island that long. It's really lovely seeing them flower now and who's visiting the flowers.
Yeah, and it's interesting you talk about flowering because it's really quick. Normally, these kinds of trees maybe take 10 years to flower. And we've had eucalypts flowering already in this forest. And I think it is because of that interconnectedness under the ground and the fact that they are endemic to here and they're in those ratios that are really important. And one of the beautiful things about this forest actually, and also Helena's forest next door, is that some of the trees were grown by Trees in Newcastle, Tin, at Redhead, and they collected seed from the new Link Road extension, so down by the John Hunter. So some of the trees here have actually been grown from seed that was collected there before that new road went through. So I think to feel that's really amazing, and to have those trees and to know, because we used to walk there and we loved it. And so it's really a lovely connection to know that some of those trees actually live on in our forest. And I think that's really beautiful, and that made me really happy when I found that out.
And we had children from the infant school, New Lambton Heights Infant School, come down and do a planting day as part of the forest as well. And that story really resonated with them too, because even at such a young age, it made a big impact on them, seeing this beautiful forest that they were driving past, and then suddenly to see bare earth and it all knocked down was really confronting for them. So to be able to have this sense of hope and that you can actually create purpose by doing something as simple as collecting a seed and growing it and being a community member to put it in the ground. And then, I think it just gives you a little bit of power back.
That is just such a beautiful roundup of our conversation. And round up in a positive way. No pesticide use here at all, is there?
Correct.
That's right. No, we're definitely not using chemicals in the garden.
Yes.
A nice roundup, of our conversation. So, Anna, since you no longer have honeybee hives, and I know that you're still passionate about bees and have this business, what else do you do to educate people about beekeeping?
Well, the lovely thing that has happened really organically since planting the tiny forest is that I now work for the Groundswell Collective. So I've been doing education programs in schools about making bee hotels and teaching people how to care for native bees in their own backyards. Today I was at Singleton Council in their library, and kids were making seed balls that they could take home and plant pollinator-friendly flowers in their gardens. And it is just so lovely to hear people connect. And locally, come August, we have some of those programs at the Landcare Centre at Chiralba, and there's going to be a free family-friendly sustainability program each month for the rest of the year. So that's really exciting and what I've been filling my days with.
Yeah, so that's August 2025 for the rest of this year that will happen. And Kelly, how does your role of a beekeeper educator fit in with everything?
Yeah, so I've got a pretty varied role. I'm actually the Education Officer Honeybees for Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. So I'm based out at Tocal at Paterson. So I spend a lot of time with commercial beekeepers, and recently I've been pretty heavily involved in developing the National Varroa Mite Management Training, which is just about to come to an end around the country. It's been going for about 18 months now. And so there's that side of it, and I teach the Certificate 3 in beekeeping, so I spend a lot of time with commercial and recreational beekeepers, trying to upskill them. And also I do talks for the Groundswell Collective as well, so I do lots of talks about native bees and about beekeeping and varroa for them, just on a volunteer basis, because I can't get enough of bees, any kind of bees. I love talking about bees, and I love teaching about bees. I mean, we got that single hive, and I really had no idea that where bees would lead me, and if I couldn't have predicted where I've ended up with bees, and then, traveling overseas on a Churchill fellowship. So it's been a crazy journey, and I just love talking to people about bees. And so I like to encourage people to, think about getting bees, stingless bees or honeybees, and, connect with the environment.
It's such a wonderful journey and very honey-enriching journey that you've had. And I love hearing about people's journeys because it doesn't just happen overnight, but it does happen, doesn't it? And it's nice to hear that.
Yeah, that's right. Life takes unexpected turns, and I think, just seize opportunities when they come your way, because you never know where you're going to end up.
If you have one tip for listeners about perhaps biodiversity in their local backyard or pollinators to have in your backyard, what would it be?
Look, Kelly can talk about some really simple strategies for how to support both food and habitat for pollinators. But I think my artistic background actually leads me to recommend people observe, to actually just take some time in their environment, whether that's their backyard or a park just down the road, and watch who is there already. Because there's often this whole world going on that we're not noticing. And once you do key into that, you then have this whole sense of wonder, and so that when you are doing these little actions, you have that sense of purpose.
Yeah, I think observation is key. I think we can all get caught up in our busy lives and our stress about work and all sorts of other things, but I think taking time to look around is really important, and to try and notice the small things. And that can lead to practical things too. So I think from a practical standpoint, find out what's endemic to your local area, and also what is going to attract pollinators, and create a diverse habitat for a range of different creatures, not just butterflies, not just pollinators, but also for lizards and amphibians and other things that you can do. And it doesn't have to be huge. You don't have to have acres and acres. You can do amazing things just in a very small space to bring biodiversity into your life. And I think the most important thing, and I think the thing that we have lost as we've become more modernised and busy, is connection with nature. And I think time and time again, scientific studies have proven that being outside, connecting with nature, is not just fun, not just nice, it's actually critical to our well-being to feel connected to the earth, because whether we like it or not, we are part of nature and we need to be in it to feel well. And I think it's really important to be outside.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming and spending some time in our tiny forest.
It's been lovely.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the ReNewy Living Podcast. I hope you're feeling more confident about taking a localised and actionable approach to living sustainably. If this episode has inspired you to take simple action, please follow the ReNewy Living Podcast so you can catch every episode. We'd love it if you could share this episode with your friends. It's a great way to spread the word and help more people join the conversation about living sustainably. You can even send me an email with the episode that really made it for you. Hearing your positive actions for change helps me understand how these stories work within our shared communities. Head over to my website, renewyliving.com.au, for the show notes and blog posts from this episode. I look forward to sharing more stories from the people of Newcastle as we delve into our community's diverse social and environmental practices for positive planetary change from a localised perspective.